1:49 p.m. Sunday, August 14th, 2022. I, insert real name here, attest that the following is a self-collaborative development rough draft take on describing a narrative, world-building, conceptual inspiration idea that's come to me that's part of the Zeppoverse project of books series and nothing more. Any and all similarities to real-life people, situations, etc. is merely coincidence of the work of fiction as we describe a world that is, of course, to some degree or another, inspired by, our own, quote-unquote, whatever that means to you. Let us begin. Imagine a world stacked on top of a world that looks like a double-decker bus was designed in the style and architectural theme of early next millennia Southern California and other large meant for autonomous vehicle living spaces, far-flung mega byways of toll road, freeway, causeway, and the quote-unquote pedestrian infrastructure that supports that in a sort of designed for tomorrow in your today's living, or however that sort of, futurist modality of sales pitch would go. If you're not sure what I mean by that, let me break that down. First, whenever I say, as a narrator and host of a self-entertainment read-along story adventure system, which you're helping to develop from the ground up by participating in the rough draft development preview audiophonic engagement podcasts podcasting of. I wish I could clean that up. That looks really nasty, that big giant spike of mouth sounds that would probably be a loud and obnoxious click in your headphones. I apologize if it happens and it bugs you. That needs to be edited. This is truly and genuinely, authentically an unscripted rough draft. Here's the idea. Imagine a megalopolis suburbia, everything's like something like Vegas / San Diego / Inland Empire / Los Angeles, as opposed to New York or any other metropolis, as the foundation root infrastructure that is then built over and then built upon in first a one stack and then ultimately a double and triple stack of snap-on right on top of each other, designed for purely for autonomous driven vehicles made of a much lighter framework and design, where all the manual driving and combustion engines stay down below. Obviously, with a tip and a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, tip of the hat to the groundbreaking, visionary megapolis world building that is exemplified in The Fifth Element, especially the early parts before you get into the whole traveling intergalactically part, but just the city that Bruce Willis wakes up in and then goes driving in after the taxi accident. For those of you who know your late 19th century cinema, emphatically looks over bridge of nerd glasses and then pushes them up. For those of you who don't, insert your response here. For those of you who do, please wait a moment. And now insert your response here. Let's discuss. Unpacking and debating that issue aside, you can imagine a place where everything feels like a wasteland of suburbia built over to be futuristic and exciting, but still yet a wasteland of suburbia and consumerism, now literally stratified in its architecture in a sort of not openly, but over time, inherently classist way. In other words, the higher up you go, the more expensive everything is because you're supposed to be more alarmingly wealthy in order to access it. Now imagine that that's not some prototype for the near-distant dystopia we might get to, but rather what you grew up living in for the last 15 years. And you, as a character, as an avatar in this world, have the relatively pleasant experience of having slummed it with the best of them down at the lower depths and partied with the elitist of the most elite of them without realizing who you were partying with up in the highest tiers of your own local medium-sized suburban megalopolis town of post-civil Trumptopian era peacetime, but yet, bifurcated Trumptopia versus the US of A, sort of wild western in the future kind of era. Graduated from high school, flunked out of university the first time, but you got a 3 strikes policy for everyone in the free university systems of the blue states of Freetopia, as it was as something on those lines, some sort of patriotic sounding blue state name for all the blue states that clung together after the inciting, violent wave of pseudo faux illegitimate and yet ultimately sort of post de facto effective Trumptopian mock civil war that played out in the very early middle 20s of the proto-Trumptopian postmodern retro revisionist history of a world that survives everything that comes out of January 6th, but barely makes it through the desired civil war that's being stoked in the current moments. That's the world some of the Zeppoverse fan fiction world building is set in, such as the episodes that I was talking about with the misnomer. There's the idea of a familial legacy megacorp called, big global corporation that it's so large, it employs so many people, it's considered its own economic free state. And it is the 4th largest such in the world and can operate within and beyond all, basic state and nation state boundaries because it's a free state of corporate enterprise. And as such, as an employer, is more important than any neo-political enterprise under the post-Civil War agreements. And this entire enterprise was once part of the sort of post-Reagan era military-industrial complex infused hyper-corporatism that led us into the 90s and beyond. But it was sort of steering towards the replace war instead of continue to endlessly elaborate on it as a profit mechanism. Literally straight up replace it. Maybe inspired a bit by the literature and the cinema of the prevailing decades criticizing the sustainable war, endless conflict state dynamo model of some dystopic future. Why not replace it with a cybernetically sustainable, non-violent alternative that doesn't literally cost lives, but does render meaningful employment and an international intra-state civil case-by-case arena by which to settle any and all disputes that could be brought to some sort of legal court system that includes this jousting by virtual gaming modality infrastructure, right? Imagine that this megacorp, being the fourth largest in the world, with competitive, like the way California is in and of itself currently, in the real worlds of natural history, wherever dimension you're in most of them, the state of California, of the formally integrated and integral states of these previously United States of America. And I say that both as satire and as foreboding world building and sort of seed planting of the fiction wherein you might find yourself exploring, should you jump on over to Solo.to/MrZeppo to connect through and to the fictional pages of my Wattpad profile over on Wattpad.com. You can find the link there. In this environment, this hitherto name of company, censored, error, file not found, is it Zygot with a triple Z, lowercase inc? Question mark? Probabilistic answer is 79 to 89% accurate, but also there were some variants to throw the whole calculation off. We haven't quite settled on a name yet, but Zygots with triple Z Inc. comparable to like the state of California. And in this fictionalized world, it might inherently sort of be rooted in the state of California, so that it just sort of became such a large corporation that needed to work so closely with the state of California in order to remain sustainable in and of itself. And it needed the state of California to remain sustainably competitive as the fifth or fourth or third largest economy in the planet, that it swallowed it whole in a friendly takeover while still respecting the civic state, nation-state mechanisms that it finds itself in this theoretical, literary, fictional world-building endeavor that you're collaborating with me in. Having achieved that successfully in terms of, like, let's call that past tense in our world building, Zygots with a triple Z arrived at its name by a pure typo. It was intended originally to be in the paperwork, in the fictional world building paperwork of the filing of the corporate registration original documents, was meant to be just Zygots with one Z incorporated with a capital I, lowercase n, lowercase c, and a period. And that was going to be its registered trademark name in the fictional world building of all of this backstory. But what happened was a very early on typo that was never caught and was sort of appreciated by the founding tyrant, provocateur, the original and the OGist of MrZeppos, an insert name here of redacted, starts with an I, ends with a bull word that means something sensible in the real world, but I haven't bothered to go find yet. Irascible, perhaps? MrZeppo, something up that alley that's like similar to the incorrigible, but not quite. Something, trans-dimensionally similar, but slightly different. So he never reprimanded anyone for it happening. And it became, to everyone's horror and secret delight, the actual name, Zygots triple Z, incorporated with a lowercase I and no period. Which some in the argumentative, fictional, legalistic, bobblehead commentator, entertainment zone of the future media of this world we're world building argued conspiratorially, as in it's purely conjectural conspiracy theory, but taken almost as fact, that somehow this spelling error rendered the corporation, no matter how many years, and it's one of those, one of those companies that's been around. It's got a Partridge Farm-like commercial. Who remembers during the great global disaster of 1997? Zygots with a triple Z does. That kind of silliness. We're gonna pretend in the retroistic world building that this original corporation was founded back when mimeograph machines, which I almost, whenever I attempt to say that word publicly, stutter. In part because I used to love it. There's a bit that someone does somewhere in a movie or a stand-up special. I forget where. In which universe? I forget what universe I consumed this in. But in some media somewhere, mimeograph machine is someone's stutter that they just can't say it. And I love it, and it's adorable, and I don't mean to make fun of people with stutters or other, speaking, habituated, whatever you call those. There's a pleasant, non-insulting word, and then a terrible, gross, why do you call it that kind of word? Insert the one from your universe here. I'm not trying to mock anybody. I just found that word challenging throughout my actual artistic real life. So back in the late, I want to set it in post-war neo-noir, but OG noir, but with a little bit of early high-tech cyberization, because we got, instead of World War I and World War II being purely analog, we get a revisionist future history in the Zeppoverse where computational advancement came along a wee bit earlier. We had some mechanical computational machines in World War I. Well, I just wanted to step that up a notch and roll the development of the internet out a decade and a half, 15 years earlier than it, maybe 20 years earlier than it really did. But also foundation that in the sort of super covert top secret, there was a certain sort of cybernetic, yet grounded in a sort of, what's his name from the comic books? The Madonna movie is one that I sort of cringe at loving, but it's a don't judge me for sort of secretly delighting in having enjoyed watching it as a kid. I don't really enjoy watching it as an adult anymore, and I haven't really quite. What's his name? With the talkie watch, with the remote walkie-talkie watch. Just a little bit more high-tech than that. You know what I'm saying? In the Zeppoverse. The 50s, the best field agents had little tiny high-frequency computational machines that had earpieces that were smaller than the kind of technology. Instead of wired to a real walkie-talkie, it was wired to a piece that would be the sort of James Bond of the post Trumptopian era level tech, but rugged out, made to sort of steampunk retroistically fit in the post-war era, which is, of course, you might take note, just a hypermash to some degree of all the Call of Duty games that I play. It's a little bit of that thrown into my own sort of revisionist history. And the grandfather, or maybe this is the great-grandchild of the original Zeppelonius Zeppo the First. And there needs to be a third name that has a Z in it. At the beginning of it, Zeppelonius Zarquad Zeppo the First, or maybe he's the third, and then his child establishes a new name lineage that requires its first, second, and third, which carries us forward into the neo future. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with that decision. Decision made. Rough draft. That's no matter. Even though this is a rough draft recording of ideas and stuff, that shouldn't change from now on. It should get integrated and propagated throughout the Zeppoverse as canon. Executive decision ordered. Here. All Zeppos agree. Good. And we'll add a special effects there, so for a hot second it feels and sounds like you're in a chamber of multiple Zeppos and they're all harumphing and there's got to be a quorum met and voted on. Insert the idea in your mind through inception now. Am I making sense? Are you following me? Good. Write it all down in directions to self. Write all that down and then post it as like an intro and make part of it transcript of this recording, but part of it true, regular, standard, literary world building, fictional narrative of like taking the reader's audience mind, Imaginarium theater in the mind there to that place, that world. And then, fast forward to this future building that we're trying to make. Post Reagan and the failure of the pro-war nation state, the military industrial complex is replaced by the non-violent global negotiation gaming league. Insert one or two more words to have a really alphabet soup mouthful. Brackets. Insert note here. All of it should come off as like sounding both satirical and legitimate. Like we're going to get serious about it, but we also get goofy about it. Right? And the family lineage of Zeppos have worked really hard to sort of provide the ultimate full immersive gaming global empire building war game system by which you can challenge the authority of other self-regulating nation corporo-economic state entities to settle disputes, right? And some of those entities might be like the state of Wisconsin or the corporate endeavor owned by this rich motherfucker individual that's trying to steal all the diamond rights of every country that has diamonds in it or whatever. As both nation states try to operate with sovereignty and corporo-economic job creator entity states try to operate on an alternate level, like a tiered system of economic sovereignty. Inspired by some of the military analysis discourse that you can find in Ghost in the Shell. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, put a pin on the corkboard. Because not only am I, in my real life, busy streaming the real life nerd epic crossover of Ghost in the Shell and Call of Duty Mobile, which for any gaming enthusiast who might be stumbling across this content in the not too distant future might find to be delightfully cutesy and hit home. Especially if you're double whammy, double nerd for both of them, as I am in real life. Also, in the fictional world, such things are part of the infrastructure because I'm kind of sort of respond to and repel away from and also incorporate some of the notions of a sustainable war and sustainable warfare, except that instead of transhumanism in the real world where the flesh is replaced by tin can bodies that can sustain war and cost $1 billion to constantly be fabricating for those who can afford that lived lifestyle. It's full immersion, cybernetics, vis-a-vis the light side version of what the Matrix might be, to tip and nod, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, please don't sue me, reference that body of work. With all due respect, that body of work is genius, but it's sort of like, well, what happened if the dark side won, right? Like ego begets mechanical AI being that does not take transcendentalism and enlightenment and some sort of evolutionary path for each body avatar format into account. And we can theorize, if I may humbly bring you to this conjecture point, dear audience, we can theorize that if there's a bad evil matrix, out there, potentially in the probability waveform function of things that might become our reality in the not too distant dystopian future, then we could postulate and theorize a light side version of that, right? And that's the goal at Zygots Triple Z. And always secretly has been in the action adventure, somewhat comic book, character cartoonified, so that like inspired by G.I. Joe as a Sunday morning cartoon, like knowing is half the battle, kids. Here's a cartoon about war for kids, cause it's the 80s and who gives a shit? Kind of way, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Please don't sue me, Hasbro or whoever the fuck owns G.I. Joe. Speaking of which, programming note, for those of you tuning into my game stream, I will be playing G.I. Joe Operation Blackout Gold Edition once I double check and test that it's actually launchable and that it was just me being a numbnuts the last time I tried to launch it. And it was just like, because it's got Gold Edition content, it doesn't just fire up. I kind of do a certain path, but it's fine. It is launchable and it should be streamable and it should be playable on my Xbox Series X. And if it isn't, the industry should be giving me a patch because I paid for it. It's on the open market and it says it's playable on the Series X, so it should be playable on the Series X. Give me a patch to fix it on my Series X machine, please and thank you. Now, back to the fictional rough drafty upbuilding of in my world. In this world, this gaming enterprise stands for, is as replacement of, in real terms, all of the world's standing armies. In as much as that you don't disband them, you just replace their real weapons with a dip into the entertainment, gaming, blood sport, full immersion, high def gaming matrix that is owned and operated in a sort of truce amongst permanent competitors triad for maximum profit rendering, tide flow results of like who's on top. So Zygot Triple Z collaborating with corporations that were previously mortal enemies. And we can cartoonify this to the point of like lethal. And I'm saying the following is fiction, right? That all of this that I'm discussing is me site sourcing my real life inspiration for like where I build my fiction in such a way that is like I'm technically asking for permission in the very content that I'm developing for some future granting of a license to commercially reference these things without getting sued. So I can create a sort of fan fiction metaverse of the world's craziest things as a wink, wink, nudge, nudge reference to what happens if I were to build my own fictional world of some dystopian future, known as the Zeppoverse. So there's the trifecta of corporations, and I have not named the other two. And they can sort of, for now, in terms of this particular episode and this rough draft of whatever it is I'm drafting, remain nameless and mysterious because the reader wouldn't know their names super right away. But they are sort of like from out of that insert name here of late century war dystopia book by insert name of author here, names all redacted and memory error corruption illegible. But the whole Oceania versus Westionica versus Eastionica or whatever their names actually were in the books. And y'all, it's either 1984 or Stranger in a Strange Land. I forget which. Or maybe that third one that I always get confused with and also forget the name of. But please don't sue me. In that sort of form, this trifecta of like lethally competitive military industrial states invested in cybernetic, full immersion, peacekeeping, nonviolent, high-def simulation technology in order to be able to punish people humanely and conduct quote-unquote war exercises humanely in order to resolve humanity's oldest fucking problem. Pardon my French. The blood wrath blind idea that all out butchering of each other war is the only possible final solution to such complex issues as territorial disputes, political divorces, etc. All the dumb things that Cain and Abel have always perpetually butchered each other about. And throughout the living human history of all the different expressions of human history in the multiverse of multiverses. So here at Zygot Triple Z, we solved that by creating the most delightfully believable, yet not brain-breakingly like post-traumatic stress disorder causing realistic, immersive blood sport gaming VR rig. Kind of like how our ancestors, both literally and in literary world building terms, as kids once totally had awesome laser tag as a thing at the mall you could go waste your time and money at for funsies, that, you know, with an aspiration of it maybe becoming a national sport that would be added to high schools, competitive, right up there with basketball and football. I really believed. I believed in that. I believed in that dream. And in the Zeppoverse, it became a reality, right? Instead of it becoming a failed franchise model business that broke people's backs and proved that commercialism is kind of dumb, because the freedom to succeed is kept in check by the freedom to totally fail when people are brainwashed out into, you know, becoming less interested. And also, you know, the angry kid in me, and this is the character in me talking, the angry kid in me that turned into an adult that didn't get to have a professional laser tag career is outraged. So in the Zeppoverse, dear friends, one of the billionaire playboy sort of bad boy with a golden heart idiot, you know, useful idiots, was in this world where laser tag became a franchise televised international sport that overshadowed all the other sports balls in a way that, but without ruining those ecosystems, right? That's how, when this crazy kid, rich kid's turn finally came about, and this is the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's great grandson, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo III. Wow, Civil War sucked. He almost had to go to the Civil War, but instead of claiming bone spurs, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because you know who we're lampooning with that. At least you should. Tip of the nose, say no more, and if you don't, shame on you. But I'm not judging you. All is forgiven. But shame on you. You should know better. Sorry for the sharp syllable S's. Sometimes that happens and it hurts your ears. It happens. It's a deformity. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just characters going off the charts. So this, if you asked me, right? Now I'm talking in character. You asked me as if I was having a discussion with someone else on stage. You asked me, right? And who the fuck is me? The person you asked? The actual playboy millionaire that you were describing in your theoretical situation. Breaks the fourth wall, looks at Ian, winks again, then comes back and says nothing more. Friend. What? I know, it's mind dizzying, but if I could do what that one baby Jesus says in that one Christmas special that my great grandpappy watched as a child on free radio television back when it was free and there were almost no commercials and you didn't have to flip channels so much because they just showed you so much awesome content, but he couldn't remember the name of, so we can't ever find it in the archives. I'm baby Jesus. I just want world peace and a clockwork train. That's all. World peace and a clockwork train to see the world in peace. If I can make that happen, here's how. You asked me, right? Not some other Joe, Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street. Well, it just so happens to be that I have the means and the manufacturing capacity and the R&D staff to have already developed multiple prototypes. And I'll tell you, the key is to give people, because for many years now we banned violent video games. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge at the audience. We banned violent video games for a generation. or at least we tried to in most states, and we failed. Even though the gaming industry was proving to be a great employer of the masses, once free coding classes were available to everyone at birth, with the global ubiquity of cheap smartphone devices made out of hemp and hemp-derived replacements for all the rare earth minerals that were destroying the world through pollution. Pause, looks at the audience, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. You get it, right? Okay, back at the bemused and befuddled imaginary character whose name I have not come up with yet. I see you don't quite understand. Did you ever see The Matrix? You're looking at me like, of course, everyone had to see The Matrix in high school. Well, did you pay attention? Or did you just ignore it like you ignored Legally Blonde? Huh? Or Day Without a Mexican? I remember quite clearly. You didn't even show up for that day. Not that I'm calling you any kind of ismist, because I know you're not. But you clearly didn't think the movie would be very interesting. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm 1/3 full, 2/3 actual Mexican from Mexico, if you go back far enough in my bloodline. Not so Mexican as to offend the right-wing purist nationalism movement, because they mostly sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge at Latinos the way that one general does in Westworld. I just startled myself on my table. I thought it was either a wormhole opening up or some evil, creepy, crawly bug, and it was just a bit of my own hair tied up in a ball, and I forgot that I'd made it. And I literally just jumped and screamed like a wee baby in the air. In the comic book version, my head would have punched a hole in the ceiling. And then I would have landed perfectly, impossibly, back in my chair without breaking my legs on my desk to laugh at and look at and pick up the little hair dangly bit by the long strandy end. I literally just made this 5 seconds before starting this recording and forgot about it there. And it makes for a great beat. Cut to interjected scene, which breaks the comedic tension with some dark, morbid thing about a sniper setting themselves up to receive the orders to take a sanctioned assassination call. But this sniper is fully above board and is deep in the simulation, not in the real world. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But only the live theater audience knows that. The people in the movie audience don't, because it's one of those secrets from the theater play that's revealed later in the movie script version. Are you following me? Stick with me. My story gets even better. Zoom back to my Zygot Triple Z franchise board of directors meeting where whatever his name was that I just invented and made canon a hot minute ago, the third, is speaking as a solid state hologram on a stage in front of all of the global competitive gaming league union of equity, block members are teleconferencing into this sidebar simulation space. It's all in Inception style. In other words, layers within layers within layers. Wherever you are, you can create a gaming layer and inception yourself into a game, which you then play and then inception back out, even though it's all hologram recreation, right? Literary title reference, Letters from Basements of Hell, or whatever the final title version of that ended up being. It's on the Wattpad. Go to Solo.to /MrZeppo, click through the Wattpad, and then scroll down the list until you see a collection of short stories, the title of which ends with the word hell. I can't remember. There was 3 options. I can't remember which one I ended up picking. But the one about sitting in the center of a building that's positioned deep in a subterranean location of a planet whose resources are being strip mined by the very AI computer that is hosting this full immersive gaming emporium solution that brings about world peace. Because the only way you could render such an addictively, awesomely, high-fidelity, high-def game that is both rip-roaringly, ridiculously fun to play, addictive, commercially viable as an economic model, but also supports, creates the jobs that create the economy driver engine that sustains the very gaming model of it also being the world's war platform, right? Like, divorces can be settled by a who's a better gamer of whatever game modality you want, whether it's some vicious blood sport or the most high-def soccer or the most intense Olympiad, athleticism. You don't actually have to be an Olympiad. You just have to be in a Zygot Triple Z Inception unit. Please don't sue me, whoever owns the movie Inception. I just want to use that same word. I don't want to totally rip off your movie. Is that a thing? Can we do that? Can we put that in there? The lawyers are talking to each other on a video call and ignoring my question. Okay. Regardless, you get the picture, right? You're following me along. You're nodding at me, but your eyes also look a little glazed over. My friend just looks out at the audience and sort of starts to realize that he is on a stage in front of a live audience, whereas before he thought we were sitting in our real life private apartment chambers where we were going to video teleconference with each other in a cyber game published by Zygot Triple Z, in which you competitively trout fish. Now, my friend likes to wager. Let me tell the audience something about my friend. The incorrigible MrZeppo, insert the rest of his new canon name here, the third, said, looking out to the audience, he's frozen still. He can sort of see you now as a consciousness entity, but he also can't move, he can't speak, and he can't stress out about his situation. He's super chill. He's feeling like a lioness aware of her safety and her cubs' innate safety because she sees all and knows all and is hyper alert, and time is dilating so she can take a private moment to herself and be one with the universe. And also a character that's on stage that's AI driven and is semi-self-aware, but not so much that it's going to destroy the play. Thank you for being you, my good buddy, whatever your name is going to end up being. See, you, dear audience, our real audience, the ones watching in the future, not the ones living inside my imaginarium of my own mind that I'm envisioning as I narrate this speech for the first time in my own impromptu collaborative development process. You, dear folks, are watching this for the first time with your very real eyes in this very real theater space that is, in theory, if all things play out, very HD VR enhanced. So much so that for the first time ever in the real theater, in a regular theater space, like Broadway or insert name of place in other capital cities of nation states from around the world, you start to really be stunned and awed and shocked and amazed at the elusive, magical things that can be presented to you, right? I can make, with the snap of a finger, the entire theater building that you physically walked into appear to disappear in the most high-def and, super deliciously wonderful movie cinematically, it looks real, but it looks fake so that my heart doesn't explode kind of way that makes fiction and storytelling so magical and take you on a journey across unbelievable horizons of new worlds. Looks back at what should be the bare bones empty space of the theater occupying the global premiere of this show, but instead we see multiple horizons of indescribable otherworldliness, and then pitch black. Just the actor, pinpointed in a solitary spotlight that can instantly and quite smoothly, fully autonomously follow him. Insert a funny comedy moment here, inspired by the two characters that sit in the balcony in the Muppets, insert name of both characters whose error file not found. The cranky old men that, hey, isn't that weird? The frog's legs look like they don't really attach to his torso. Or whatever kind of snarky junk they would always say. But instead it's, legally, totally ambiguously different characters of my own design, whose names I have also not rendered yet, so insert them in here later. Stealing jobs from real life follow spot operators by making them fully autonomous and AI driven? Yes and or no. Here's what it is. For every one real life lighting operator, the AI machine can control multiple sets of other devices without the operator having to move, because it recalculates the movements based on the knowledge of its, the spatial differential in its physical placement, so that one lightboard operator, which, for those of you who are not super savvy about how theater works, in traditional 19th, 20th, and 21st century live stage performance endeavors, there's usually a set of stage crews on stage, cleverly masked and hiding in the shadows, often operating technically in full view of the audience, but hidden by the craftiest of theatrical gimmickry and tricks, and tricks of light sometimes even, and just, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more sort of chicanery that is theater magic and theater design and theater costumery and et cetera, et cetera. Now imagine a system where, I've worked crews where there was me and two other lighting follow spot operators on shows. And that's, of course, a less than minimum wage billable by hour pay rate. Now, and a sort of near dystopic, but for the light, sort of perfect future steampunk, but AI enhanced theater company that was set in the same equivalent but slightly more higher tech 19th, 20th, and 21st century. It's like, a smaller skeleton crew of more highly technically skilled operators of all the sort of cybernetically enhanced robot AI theater equipment. Like the lift is a robot. For those of you who are theater nerds and have ever had to work on a lift with one or multiple person crews, you can imagine the same scenarios, but AI enhanced along the lines of the Tachikoma in Section 9, right? For shits and giggles. Okay, so zooming back, the pinprick of follow spot operation, scopes down using the whatever those are called. I forget the official theater term for it. Not the shutter, the iris. Scoping that iris down until that pinprick is next to nothing, and then dropping whatever remaining ambient light that was supporting the follow spot so that the theater goes into full darkness. Obviously, within whatever safety tolerance limits of the kind of safety light that's got to stay on. And then a dawning of a new day kind of lighting transition that brings up a backlit character walking downstage from deep upstage in a cybernetically enhanced theater space where it feels like the audience and him are standing on the precipice of a new world, a new dawn, a new cybernetic AI capital city of mystery and delight, where they proceed to engage in these sustainable, non-violent, but graphically intense virtual reality war games, not just for shits and giggles, but for virtual professional blood sport on multiple scales. Like there's the non-blood sport kind that's laser tag induced. Like it's all very sort of just like, oh, look, I sparkled and the score went up. and not horrific, to the most like to the depths of the things you can imagine in historical reenactment, with physical, gortastic graphic levels set to ultra high def, super reality. And the thing that makes it a tangible, sustainable mechanism is that, depending on the context and the permissions granted by the users and the economic power nation states involved, those that would be the standing armies of the world can participate in long duration, multi-day, multi-week, multi-month, multi-tiered, multi-strategied campaigns on a year-to-year war season with year-long peace off, time off season, real-life career, full immersion, virtual reality engagements by which they can decide things that follow the tradition and the lore and the rules of war and the rule of law, as if world history had realized the madness of actually pumping real lead into real bodies, and discovered the wiseness of enduring the simulated pain. Imagine playing Call of Duty Online or Call of Duty Warzone or Call of Duty Mobile, but every time you got taken out by a competitor, it hurt. Really just hard enough to be like fucking frustrating. But you were also protected from long-term negative biochemical consequences because of safety things, etc., blah, 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 blah. And that if you chose to, the way you could have always been able to choose to sign up for whatever given nation state's military to be a professional defender and or occasional violator of human rights and invader and conquester of other nation states, it was all totally sublimated into a virtual arena. So it could be sustainably worked out in a multitude of ways, from like reenacting World War II on a once every decade kind of historical sport event where people go to watch a true-to-life reenactment of everything World War II. Because, look around you. America's fixated, obsessed. There's entire channels devoted to repacking, unpacking, supposedly analyzing, supposedly learning from. What could the human species learn from such a full immersion system and a culture of celebrating sustainable, non-violent, virtual blood sport experience like that, so that you could tangibly suffer the consequences and survive? Would that make us flippant and then therefore less well adapted to care for one another? Or would that deepen and broaden and magnify our capacity to engage in a meaningful, compassionate, peaceful pacifism of everything else we do the rest of the world in reality and or in our virtual realities? Doesn't have to be so god-awfully stupid, blindly judgmental and brute force, ugly, toxic, and all stunted towards violence. Question mark in the air as one of the central pillars of this literary work. I ask you, dear audience, I ask you, with a snap of a fingers and the gong of a bell as you snap out of your reverie, dear friend and character who kind of forgets about the fourth wall in the audience, I ask you, Brad Chadley, the quadruplist. No, that's not how you... What would you call the fourth? Just the fourth, right? I guess. Brad Chadley... Bradley Chad Bradley, the fourth. I ask you, what do you think? I don't know, but there's no... It sounds crazy. I know, but there's no way to find out, right? Until you build it. Well, as the oldest of the first memeable movies ever once said, Build it, and they will come. Is that what they said? It sounds a little dirtier now than when I usually think about it in my head. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. And with that, friends, I leave you to ponder what kind of place the Zeppoverse is. And I invite you to go proofread some of the sample chapters that are currently existing. Reorient yourself. Cast yourself back into it now and get a hang on get a load up of what's going on. Get the download into your brain and start engaging with the public discourse commentary by setting yourself up a Wattpad account of your own so you can leave comments on every page of every chapter of every book. Until then, I thank you and say namaste for tuning into this raw, real, radically without music, hyper-collaborative rough draft special edition, new recording of this hitherto unwritten chapter, page, and verse of the Zeppoverse that is currently untitled. Namaste, and thank you. Signing off for now, this has been the artist, known as the incorrigible MrZeppo.